Imagine, for a moment, walking slowly on a calm late afternoon. The sky begins to soften into gentle colors, somewhere between gold and lilac, and the wind blows with a tenderness that almost feels like a whisper. It is in this setting that I invite you to step, not only into a story, but into a space of calm, where reality meets fantasy and the fragile becomes immense. Today's story does not begin in a stone castle, nor in gilded palaces, but in something simple, almost disposable: cardboard. And yet, it is within this humble material that an entire kingdom found its home. Close your eyes, if you wish, and allow yourself to listen to each detail as if strolling through a dream. It doesn't matter where you are right now, lying in bed, sitting quietly, or just seeking a way to rest your mind after a long day. What matters is letting the images form gently, like clouds gathering on the horizon. Our castle has no ancient stones, no stained glass windows. It is born from improvisation, from crumpled boxes, from clumsy cutouts, from tape that stubbornly peels at the edges. And yet, to the one who created it, it already rose as an impenetrable fortress, full of stories waiting to be told. What distracted eyes might see as nothing more than a pile of scraps, in the right hands and fertile mind, became something grand, worthy of remembrance. It is curious to think that many of history's most enduring realms first rose out of someone's imagination. Before palaces, thrones, and banners, there was only an idea. And that is precisely what makes the cardboard castle so special. It needs no firm foundation, because its true strength lies in the unseen, in fantasy. Perhaps you too remember a moment in childhood when an ordinary object came alive before your eyes. A chair became a ship. A bedsheet turned into a cave. A box was more than a box. It was a hideout, a treasure chest, a portal. The castle we speak of today was born from that same gesture. The gesture of believing. But do not be mistaken, this is not merely a children's tale. It is, in truth, a reflection on how we create worlds to protect ourselves, to play, to explore roles we may never live in the concrete world. Inside this castle, there was a king. There were subjects. There were feasts, battles, and even diplomacy. All invented, all invisible, and yet all very real to those willing to believe. In the moments ahead, you will be guided through this universe. We will walk the cardboard halls, climb the fragile towers, sit upon an improvised throne, and perhaps by the end, you will realize that the castle still exists, not in boxes and cutouts, but in your own memory, where we keep what touched us even without ever truly existing. Before we go on, I offer a special invitation. If this idea of turning the simple into the grand stirs something within you, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we share stories that do not rush, but move slowly, like footsteps in a garden at sunset. Leave a comment too, telling whether you once built something like this in your childhood, or if you hold in memory a kingdom of your own, made purely of imagination. These sharings help keep the flame of this space alive, making the experience even more collective, even more comforting. With every video, the goal is not merely to inform, but to offer shelter, a moment of rest, an invitation to slow down. The cardboard castle is, therefore, more than a setting. It is a symbol. A reminder that we don't need much to create something extraordinary. Sometimes, it is enough to believe that what we hold in our hands can become greater than it seems. So take a deep breath. Let the words fall gently upon you like autumn leaves. Today, we cross together the fragile gates of a kingdom that never existed in the tangible sense, yet somehow remains untouched. A kingdom that teaches us to value creativity, innocence, and the power of the stories that cradle us. And thus, we open the doors to this story. With slow steps, we cross the threshold between the real and the imagined. What comes next need not be believed as fact, but simply felt as a dream. A dream born of cardboard, yet for an instant, strong enough to hold walls greater than reality itself. It all begins in a simple way. There is no grand announcement, no trumpets sounding to mark the birth of a kingdom. The first chapter of this story arises from something almost invisible, a forgotten piece of cardboard. Perhaps it was part of an old box, now useless, abandoned in a corner of the yard. Perhaps it had once carried something important, but now it lay there, forgotten, waiting to be swept away by the wind or washed away by the rain. And yet, this simple fragment carried within it the possibility of becoming something more. Like a seed fallen by chance, needing only fertile soil to bloom, the piece of cardboard waited for the gaze of someone willing to see beyond what it appeared to be. To distracted eyes, it was nothing but trash, a worthless material, doomed to be forgotten. But to a mind awakened to the magic of imagination, that piece was already transforming into a wall, into a tower, into the gateway to a new world. It is curious to think how the destiny of an object can change depending on who finds it. What for some is leftover, for others is possibility. And in that delicate instant, when the crumpled box was touched by creative hands, it ceased to be only what it was and became the foundation of something yet to come. This gesture, rescuing the discarded, giving new life to what seemed lost, holds a quiet beauty. It reminds us that we do not need much to begin. Sometimes greatness is born from scraps, from remnants, from improvisation. The cardboard castle did not begin with towering spires, but with a single solitary piece, chosen almost by chance, and little by little joined by others. The cardboard, with its fragile texture and marks of use, already carried stories. Perhaps it had once held toys, or bottles, or books, or simple household items. By becoming the base for an imaginary fortress, it took on a new meaning. It left behind the weight of practical function and began to carry the lightness of fantasy. Perhaps this is one of the most beautiful powers of imagination, the ability to transfigure. We do not need to wait for the extraordinary. It is enough to look at the ordinary with different eyes. The child who found that first piece of cardboard did not see dirt, but possibility. Did not see scrap, but promise. And so, the foundation of the castle was born. A single piece placed on the ground already seemed like a wall. Leaning against another, it became the corner of a tower. Laid flat, it turned into a pathway. The simple act of repositioning the object, of folding it slightly, of taping it to make it stand, was already the beginning of construction. The most interesting part is that, at that first moment, there was no clear plan. There was no technical drawing, no defined idea of what the castle would be. There was only the feeling that something could be born from there. And that feeling alone was enough to sustain the first steps. There is a special tenderness in that instant. Because before the walls, before the gates and the thrones, there was only the gesture of believing that something simple could become grand. That gesture, so discreet, is the true foundation of the story. And perhaps this is where the narrative connects with each of us. How many times in our own lives has a piece of cardboard appeared before us? Something seemingly useless, fragile, or purposeless, but which, once given our attention, became the starting point of something greater. It might have been an idea, a conversation, a memory. It might have been a blank page or an unlikely opportunity. But, like the cardboard, it carried within itself an entire castle. In remembering this, you may realize how beginnings are often silent. They do not arrive wrapped in bright clarity, but in small signs. A forgotten box, a simple gesture, an almost invisible detail. And from there, imagination begins to build. If you have ever had such experiences, when an ordinary object gained a new life in your mind, share them in the comments. This exchange of memories creates an invisible thread that connects our stories and expands the very castle we are visiting here. And if this content speaks to you, consider supporting this space by subscribing to the channel. In doing so, you keep alive a project that, like cardboard, depends on the care of those who believe in it to remain standing. In the end, what lingers from this first moment is the reminder that even the most fragile can become the foundation of the eternal. The piece of cardboard that could have been carried away by the wind became, by choice, the starting point of an entire kingdom. A kingdom that did not need to be visible to exist. And so, before us, the castle begins to emerge. Still timid, still incomplete, but with its soul already defined. To transform the simple into the sublime, the discarded into the precious, the invisible into the eternal. The cardboard castle was not born of a grand plan. There were no architects, no engineers, no maps drawn with ruler and compass. It was born of improvisation, of a sudden urge to turn what was at hand into something far greater. It was in this spirit that the first piece of cardboard found companions in others, slowly forming the sketch of a construction. Improvisation carries something magical within it. It is as if the mind, freed from rigid expectations, creates more naturally. Looking at the pile of boxes, one did not see only crumpled leftovers, but possibilities. A larger one could become a wall. A smaller one, perhaps, a tower. Folded flaps turned into gates. Improvisation stitched everything together with tape and imagination, tracing the castle's first outlines. Each piece was fitted carefully, though without precision. The tape often refused to hold. The wind sometimes knocked down part of the structure, and the very fragility of the material seemed to laugh at the audacity of calling it a fortress. But none of that mattered. To the builder, each repair was just another detail, another symbolic brick added to the work. The improvisation, with all its flaws, became part of the charm. There was beauty in not knowing exactly how the castle would look in the end. With every new box added, fresh ideas emerged. Perhaps a taller tower here, a secret passage there, an improvised hall elsewhere. Nothing was predetermined, and precisely for that reason the construction felt so alive. It was as though the castle was growing on its own, guided by an imagination nourished by the present moment. This process reminds us of something essential. We do not always need a perfect plan to begin. Many times, improvisation takes us places we would never have reached had we followed a fixed design. And so, the cardboard castle was not merely play, but a silent lesson in creative freedom. With each cut of the scissors, each clumsy fold, a new part of the kingdom was born. Small mistakes were not discarded, but embraced. A wall that fell could become a secret passage. A crooked tower gained the charm of appearing ancient, as if it had withstood past battles. Improvisation allowed imperfection to become part of the whole, rather than something to be erased. And perhaps that is what made the castle so special. It was not perfect, but it was true. Every strip of tape, every patch, every piece of reused cardboard told a story. And even without symmetry, it rose with dignity, as if it reflected something far greater, the boundless power of imagination. Within that improvisation also lay a rare sense of freedom. Unlike real constructions, where every detail must be calculated, the cardboard castle could be whatever it wanted, whenever it wanted. There was no right or wrong, no criticism or demand, only the desire to create. It was, in its essence, a safe space to experiment, to dream, to make mistakes without fear. If you pause to reflect, you may also recall a moment in life when you improvised something and, without realizing it, created something valuable. It might have been a game, an unexpected solution to a problem, or even a conversation that took an unplanned turn and became unforgettable. Improvisation has that power to turn the unforeseen into opportunity. As in the earlier topics, I leave here an invitation. Share in the comments if you have ever built something improvised that, in some way, became unforgettable. It is fascinating to see how many of our best memories did not come from perfect plans, but from moments when we simply allowed things to happen. And if this narrative stirs your memory or awakens your curiosity, subscribe to the channel to continue following these stories that rescue the extraordinary hidden in everyday life. The cardboard castle, raised without measurements or technical drawings, kept growing. Tower after tower, wall after wall, it took shape. To passers-by, it was still only a heap of fragile boxes. But to the one dreaming within it was already a fortress, already a stage for stories, already the seat of an entire kingdom. And so, through improvisation, the castle stood firm, not against the wind, not against the rain, but within the mind of its creator. For, in the end, it did not need solid walls to exist. It needed only a heart willing to believe. Every birth carries within it a kind of enchantment. It is the moment when something that once existed only in imagination begins to take shape before the eyes. And so it was with the cardboard castle. Until then, it had been nothing more than a pile of loose pieces, boxes stacked without order, fragile improvisations held together by tape. But there came a moment, small, silent, almost imperceptible, when everything joined together and was no longer seen as scraps, but as a true castle. The birth of the castle did not happen all at once. It was like the slow breaking of dawn, when the sky brightens little by little until suddenly it is day. An improvised tower raised here, a cardboard wall placed there, and gradually the structure revealed something greater. To passers-by, it may have been just boxes, but to the creator, there was no doubt, it was a castle. And, as with every birth, there was emotion. There was joy in seeing the space begin to transform. The yard, the living room, or wherever the construction was being raised was no longer the same. The ordinary ground became an inner courtyard, the fragile walls became imposing ramparts, and a simple doorway cut into the cardboard assumed the grandeur of a royal gate. The castle was born in the imagination before it was born in the world. That is perhaps its most beautiful trait. Every visible detail was already inhabited by invisible layers. A box with its lid open was described as a banquet hall. A piece of cardboard laid on the floor became a stone pathway. A crooked tower was presented as proof of ancient battles. The birth, therefore, was not only physical, but narrative. It was a construction of boxes and also of stories. This double birth, material and imaginary, gave the castle a life of its own. It was not only what could be seen, but also what could be told. And the more stories were added, the more alive it became. Even without doors that opened, the castle already had inhabitants. Even without windows, it already looked out onto distant horizons. There is something deeply human in this gesture. We, as storytelling beings, hold the power to give life to whatever we touch with imagination. We create symbols, invent meanings, raise castles where once there was only emptiness. And perhaps that is why this birth feels so striking. It reminds us that the simple can indeed become monumental. For the one who built the castle, that moment felt like crowning a work. The eyes no longer saw scattered boxes, but unity. One could already imagine a throne in the center, subjects walking about, guards watching from towers. It was the instant when fantasy ceased to be only desire and became tangible reality, fragile though it was. But the birth of the castle also carried its vulnerability. Any strong wind could topple a wall. Any rainfall could dissolve the ramparts. And yet, none of this diminished its grandeur. For its strength was not in the material, but in belief. The birth, then, was less about cardboard and more about the courage to believe. It is beautiful to think that we all carry within us our own cardboard castles. Fragile projects, improvised dreams, ideas that seem unlikely to endure. But once born, even if only for moments, they become real. Because birth is an act of affirmation. In declaring, "This is a castle," the Creator decreed its existence, and nothing could undo that certainty. If you have ever lived a moment when something small or fragile suddenly came alive before your eyes, you may know well what such a birth feels like. Share your memory in the comments, if you wish. Stories like these not only connect us, but also strengthen this community that, here, builds together a great invisible castle of memories and reflections. And if this content brings you calm or stirs your imagination, consider subscribing to the channel. It is a simple gesture, but one that helps keep this space of quiet encounters alive. And so, the cardboard castle was born. Not with fanfare, but with silence. Not with solid stone, but with fragile boxes. And yet, it was born with the same dignity as any other construction. For what sustained it was not the weight of matter, but the lightness of imagination. And once born, the castle could no longer be seen as before. It had come into being, and it would exist for as long as someone believed in it. Every castle, even the most fragile, needs a symbolic center, a kind of heart that defines it, that gives it authority and purpose. In the case of the cardboard castle, that center was found in something equally simple, an ordinary chair, slightly worn by time, which, once covered with scraps of cardboard, pieces of cloth, and colorful ribbons, was transformed into the throne of an entire kingdom. It is curious how imagination requires so little to crown greatness. All it took was placing the chair in a prominent spot, perhaps in the middle of an improvised room or atop a base made of stacked boxes, for it to gain new meaning. Before, it was just a common object, used for sitting. Now, it was the royal throne, where decisions would be made, feasts opened, and stories told. The cardboard throne had no gold, no inlaid precious stones. Its brilliance came from another source, the gaze of those who believed in it. A child, upon sitting there, did not simply occupy a chair. They assumed the position of king or queen, holding in invisible hands a scepter, and on their imagined head a crown. The simple act of sitting was enough to transform the entire space into a noble hall. It is fascinating to realize how symbols are born out of nothing. The throne, after all, did not need to be crafted from noble materials to fulfill its role. It was a symbol because it was chosen as such. It was the point around which the kingdom organized itself, where invisible subjects bowed and knights pledged their oaths. Power did not reside in the object, but in the story woven around it. This improvised throne also reminds us of the beauty in valuing what we have at hand. There was no need to wait for perfection, no need for an ornate chair or gleaming fabrics. It was enough to take what was available and, with creativity, clothe it in meaning. The cardboard throne was poor in appearance, but rich in significance. By imagining themselves seated upon it, the castle's creator experienced something rare, the feeling of belonging to something greater. The throne was not merely a place of rest, but a place of voice. From there, proclamations were issued, decrees that shaped the destiny of the imagined kingdom. From there came orders of defense against fictional armies and invitations to invented banquets. And the most beautiful part was that, many times, the throne was shared. Friends, siblings, neighbors who visited the improvised castle were invited to sit and taste the feeling of being king or queen for a few moments. The throne, then, ceased to be a symbol of exclusive authority and became a symbol of sharing, of collective imagination. This alternation had its own charm. Each new occupant brought forth a different story. One friend might imagine himself a stern king, another saw herself as a wise queen, and even dolls and stuffed animals were placed upon the seat, assuming for a few seconds the destiny of the kingdom. In this way, the cardboard throne became a stage for interpretations, a reflection of each visitor's imagination. In this detail lies a gentle reminder for all of us. It is not the throne that makes the king, but the gaze we cast upon it. So often, in our own lives, simple objects or places take on greatness because we choose to believe in them. It may be a desk where we write, a corner of the house that brings us comfort, or even a park bench where we reflect. They become our personal thrones, not because they are noble, but because we clothe them in meaning. If this idea awakens something in you, share it in the comments. What has been your cardboard throne? Perhaps a simple place that, for some reason, made you feel important, safe, or special. By sharing these memories, we build together a mosaic of recollections that, like the throne of this castle, remind us of the power to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. And if this reflection brings you serenity, consider subscribing to the channel. Each subscription is like another stone, or better, another piece of cardboard, that helps keep this space of calm and imagination standing. In the end, the cardboard throne was not fragile. On the contrary, its strength lay in what could not be toppled. Neither wind nor rain could destroy what it represented, for it did not exist only in cardboard and tape. It existed, above all, in the mind of whoever sat upon it, rising with dignity before an entire kingdom that, though invisible, was real in every detail. Thus, among improvised boxes and fragile walls, the throne was born. It did not shine in the sunlight, but radiated through imagination. And it was from that throne that the castle found its voice, its order, and its center. For every kingdom, even an imaginary one, needs a place to call its heart. Every castle needs inhabitants. It is not enough to raise towers, walls, and halls. They must be filled with life, with voices, and with stories. In the cardboard castle, this life did not come from flesh and blood people, but from something far more subtle, the invisible subjects. They were not present to the eyes, yet they lived vividly in the imagination. Along every improvised corridor appeared loyal guards who, clad in shining armor of thought, protected the fragile cardboard gates. In the non-existent halls, wise counselors whispered opinions about the kingdom's fate. And in kitchens that had never been built, invisible servants prepared banquets that existed only in the realm of fantasy. These subjects were shaped by the mind with the same ease as folding cardboard. A simple moment with closed eyes was enough for them to gain names, faces, and personalities. Some were brave, others clumsy. Some carried ancient stories, as if they had been there long before the castle's construction. Others were born out of each new game, invented in the heat of the moment. The beauty of the invisible subjects lay in the fact that they did not need to be perfect. They were multiple, changeable, reflecting the mood of whoever imagined them. On joyful days, they seemed to join in celebrations and feasts. On quiet days, they became silent sentinels patrolling the walls. Always ready, always present, even if never seen. The castle, which once felt empty, came alive. It was no longer just a fragile structure, but a stage filled with characters. Every improvised room pulsed with the presence of its unseen inhabitants. and this sensation filled not only the physical space but also the heart of the one who dwelled in that world. It was as if the castle breathed, as if it throbbed with its own energy. It is curious how imagination has the power to populate emptiness. What to an outsider might appear as silence, to the one inside was a chorus of voices. And this shows us that one does not always need people around to feel accompanied. Sometimes it is enough to invent them. The invisible subjects were, in this sense, more than characters. They were companions, confidants, inseparable allies. Perhaps you, too, once created your own invisible subjects, even without realizing it. Many of us, in childhood, invented imaginary friends. They appear when we need company, when we long to share something, or simply when the real world feels too small to contain all our creativity. In the cardboard castle, those friends gained titles: knights, counselors, cooks, even jesters. Each one had a role and helped keep the kingdom alive. This practice, though it may seem simple, carries a profound meaning. To create invisible subjects is, in a way, an exercise in imagination and in care. It is to build bonds with figures that exist only within us, yet still manage to bring us comfort. And most importantly, they remind us that we are never completely alone as long as we are able to imagine. If this idea awakens a memory in you, share it in the comments. Did you ever have an imaginary friend, or create characters that lived within your playtime? These memories, shared here, help compose a vast collective mosaic, as if each of us were bringing our own invisible subjects to dwell in this castle of stories. And if this kind of reflection brings you serenity, consider subscribing to the channel. In doing so, you too become part of this community, which, in a way, is a kingdom inhabited by both real and imagined people. In the end, the invisible subjects were no less real than any other part of the castle. Though made only of thoughts, they gave movement and soul to the fortress. Without them, the castle would have been nothing but a heap of boxes. With them, it became the stage for feasts, battles, and ceremonies. Thus, among fragile walls and crooked towers, voices and presences arose. And the castle, born of cardboard, now breathed like a living organism. For every kingdom, even the most improbable, needs its people. And in that unlikely place, this people existed, unseen to the eyes, yet intensely present in the heart of the believer. Every kingdom, even those that exist only in imagination, needs rules. They are what sustain order, shape coexistence, and turn a chaotic space into a community. In the cardboard castle, the rules were born as spontaneously as its fragile walls. They were not written on scrolls, nor proclaimed by trumpets. They emerged in quiet conversations, in improvised decisions, in decrees spoken with firm voices before invisible subjects. The first rules were simple, almost obvious. Whoever sat on the throne had to speak with respect. No one could cross the gates without permission, and every visit to the castle had to be received with hospitality. These norms, created in the heat of play, soon gained the weight of law. Within that space, it did not matter how fragile the walls were. What kept the kingdom standing were the invisible agreements. Over time, new rules were added. Codes of conduct arose for imaginary nights, instructions for fictitious festivals, and even decrees for unlikely situations, such as dragon attacks or magical storms. With each new circumstance, a new rule was created, and the castle became more organized, more cohesive, more like a true kingdom. These rules, however, were not cold impositions. They were pacts of imagination. They were reminders that, in that space, anything was possible, as long as it was lived out with respect. The great lesson was clear. Play did not mean the absence of order, but the construction of its own order. An order that did not need to mirror the outside world, yet was strong enough to sustain that particular universe. And there was a charming detail. Because the kingdom was imaginary, the rules also carried a certain flexibility. If a rule ceased to make sense, it could be forgotten, replaced, or reinvented. This gave the castle a fluidity that real kingdoms often lack. Nothing was written in stone. Everything was written in imagination. The most fascinating thing is that these rules were not confined within the cardboard walls. They often spilled beyond them. Respect, hospitality, generosity, simple values that became part of real life, though they had first been rehearsed in play. It was as if the castle also functioned as a school of values, where one could practice, in a playful way, what would later shape character. If you stop to think, perhaps you too experienced something similar. Maybe in childhood games where you and your friends invented your own laws, agreements no one dared to break. Rules that, though fictional, felt sacred for as long as the game lasted. These moments reveal how imagination can teach us about coexistence, about limits, and about the importance of respecting others, even when everything is make-believe. And here is an invitation. Share in the comments if you remember a rule invented in your childhood games. Perhaps it was a "you can't step off the sidewalk" that represented molten lava, or a "whoever shouts first loses" that became unquestionable law. These little norms, born in improbable worlds, helped shape who we are today. And if that memory brings you a quiet smile, consider subscribing to the channel. It is a simple gesture, yet one that helps keep this collective construction of stories and memories alive. The kingdom of the cardboard castle, sustained by invisible rules, became increasingly real. The laws were not merely inventions, but pillars that kept the game alive and cohesive. There were no judges or real soldiers, but there was a tacit agreement. Everyone who crossed the gates, visible or invisible, would respect the rules that gave meaning to the place. Thus, among fragile walls and an improvised throne, was born not only a castle, but an entire society, organized by laws that existed only because someone believed in them. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson. Every kingdom, even an imaginary one, needs order to flourish. And when that order is built from imagination, respect, and sharing, it becomes stronger than any wall of stone could ever be. No kingdom is complete without its celebrations. They are what bring color to routine, unite the subjects, and transform the space into a stage of joy. In the cardboard castle, even with its fragile walls and makeshift throne, it could not be any different. There, among stacked boxes and strips of tape, the great banquet hall was born. It is curious to call it a hall, since in practice it was merely a slightly wider space left between two cardboard walls. There were no ornate ceilings, no columns, no golden chandeliers. There was only emptiness. But that emptiness was enough, because imagination filled it with colors, lights, and sounds. There, whenever the desire arose, grand celebrations took place, carried out with all the pomp the mind could conjure. The festivities began with solemn announcements. Invisible trumpets echoed through the corridors, calling knights, counselors, and unseen subjects to gather. The cardboard throne, decorated with scraps or colored paper, served as a stage for speeches. And with each celebration, it felt as though the castle, still so fragile, became impenetrable. After all, what could possibly destroy a place where so many voices came together in joy? The food was another spectacle in itself. There were no real dishes, yet imagination was never content with little. Banquets appeared out of nowhere, long tables laden with golden breads, savory cheeses, shimmering fruits, and even delicate desserts. Each bite was only an empty gesture, but within the fantasy, it felt like tasting the finest flavors. And the most beautiful part was that everyone, without exception, was included. No one was left out. In the imaginary kingdom, there was always room at the table. And there was also music. Not music played by visible instruments, but an invisible orchestra that performed at every gathering. Violins played softly, drums beat in rhythm, and even harps joined the melodies. Sometimes, a song invented on the spot became the kingdom's anthem, sung with delight. The cardboard hall filled with voices that, though inaudible to outsiders, echoed deeply in the hearts of those who imagined them. The celebrations needed no grand reason. They might honor the building of a new tower, the visit of a friend, or simply the arrival of a sunny afternoon. It was this simplicity that made everything so special. The castle did not require royal coronations or victorious battles to celebrate. The mere desire to gather was enough, even if the guests were invisible. It is important to see how these festivities revealed something profound about the kingdom. It did not exist only to protect, but also to embrace. It was a place where joy found room, where each fragile detail was transformed into a symbol of abundance. The improvised hall showed that, often, we need very little to celebrate. All it takes is creating a space, opening the heart, and allowing imagination to do the rest. Perhaps you too have had your own improvised halls. Maybe it was a blanket fort, a circle of friends in the street, or even a simple kitchen table that, for a moment, became a ballroom. If such a memory comes to mind, share it in the comments. By exchanging these small celebrations, we build together a great banquet of memories. And if this content brings you serenity, consider subscribing to the channel. In doing so, you become part of this community that, even from afar, celebrates the beauty of simplicity. In the end, the cardboard castle's festivities needed no fireworks or formal invitations. All it took was the will to celebrate. All it took was the belief that, within that fragile space, the greatness of an entire kingdom could fit. And when the music ceased, when the hall returned to silence, the castle remained alive. Because the memory of those celebrations became part of its walls, as though every strip of tape carried echoes of laughter and voices. Thus, among boxes and cardboard, the castle was transformed into a stage for unforgettable feasts. And though invisible to the outside world, these celebrations held the same importance as any royal ball in stone halls. For in the end, what truly matters is not the material, but the spirit that sustains it. Every kingdom needs a territory, and every territory, even an invisible one, benefits from a map. In the cardboard castle, there were no real borders, but there was a need to organize the space in order to make the kingdom more coherent. Thus was born the map of the imaginary territory, drawn with pencils, colored pens, and, above all, with imagination. The map was not precise. It had no scale, no geographic coordinates. It was not an official document, but a symbolic representation. Each cardboard tower was marked with a square or a circle. Each corridor, a winding line. The walls, made of stacked boxes, appeared as double lines to indicate protection. And beyond that, there were invented details. Paper forests, rivers flowing in wavy lines, mountains built from piles of books, neighboring castles that existed only in the mind. The act of creating the map was, in itself, a silent celebration. The pencil tracing the paper indicated more than physical position. It pointed to the stories that could unfold there. A forest might hide a treasure, a bridge might lead to a secret tower, a clearing could serve as the stage for a royal gathering. Each element drawn was also a promise of adventure. The map also helped give meaning to the rules of the kingdom. The gates, the borders of the territory, the banquet areas, the corridors for imaginary duels, all found their place on the sheet of paper, which served as a guide for the kingdom and its invisible subjects. Anyone who looked at the map knew exactly where each action could take place, and where each character might be, even if they existed only in imagination. There is something fascinating about creating maps of non-existent places. They allow us to organize chaos, plan adventures, and build an alternative reality. More than mere drawings, these maps carry stories. Every line is a potential narrative, every curve of the river a decision of travel, every hill a challenge that perhaps exists only in our minds. The map of the cardboard castle also worked as an invitation. Anyone who looked at it was called to join in the kingdom's creation. A friend might suggest a new path, an invisible subject might gain a special tower, or a celebration might be located in a newly drawn clearing. The map, then, was not just a representation of space, but a space for participation, collaboration, and collective invention. In addition, the map had the role of preserving memories. Each adventure, each gathering, and each celebration was recorded on it, even if only symbolically. The memory of the kingdom, of its festivities, and of its invisible subjects found there a concrete place, even if only in simple lines and colors. It was a way of materializing the intangible, of making visible what existed only in the heart and imagination of those who played. And in this act of drawing imaginary maps, there is also a life lesson. Many times, we need to map out our own inner territories, the paths we will follow, the boundaries we will set, the spaces we want to occupy. The map of the cardboard castle reminds us that there is no problem in starting simple, in drawing without precision, in imagining without certainties. What matters is to create, to explore, and to believe that each line carries meaning. If you have ever drawn maps of worlds that existed only in your mind, share it in the comments. These memories are bridges that connect us with others who also built invisible castles. And if this content awakens something within you, consider subscribing to the channel so we can continue exploring these silent worlds together, made of paper, imagination, and memories. In the end, the map of the imaginary territory was more than lines on a sheet. It was the guide to adventures, the record of stories, and, above all, the proof that even the most fleeting kingdoms can have their own logic, their own meaning, and their own beauty. For when one believes, any piece of paper can contain entire worlds, and each trace has the power to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. The castle of cardboard would have no grandeur if not for its towers and walls, fragile though they were. Each stacked box, each folded piece of cardboard, represented not only protection but also the courage to believe that something so delicate could withstand, at least for a time, the harshness of the real world. The towers, both upright and crooked at once, rose as landmarks of the kingdom. Some were tall and lofty, others short and sturdy, but all shared the same fragility. A single gust of wind, an awkward hand, or a moment of distraction was enough to bring them down. And yet, that fragility did not diminish their magnificence. On the contrary, every imperfection added personality. Each tilt, each crease, told a silent story of construction and persistence. The walls, made of boxes placed side by side, carried the same symbolic weight. They marked the boundaries of the kingdom, protected the cardboard throne, and gave the impression of security. But above all, they taught delicacy. A stone wall would never need adjusting. A cardboard one demanded constant care. It required repair, reinforcement, sometimes reinvention, as if the act of keeping the fortress alive was itself part of the game. This fragility carried its own charm. It made every gesture meaningful. Each piece of tape, each carefully balanced box, was more than physical effort. It was a commitment to the continuity of the kingdom. The castle, though made of ephemeral material, gained value precisely because it depended on attention and care. And in this, it quietly taught that even the most delicate things can sustain something extraordinary when treated with patience and affection. Beyond that, the fragility of the towers and walls fueled imagination. Every risk of collapse was also an opportunity to create new stories. A fallen tower could be rebuilt with greater splendor, perhaps becoming a council chamber or a secret defense fortress. Each cracked wall could give rise to hidden passages or lookout posts. In this castle, imperfection was the raw material of fantasy. It is interesting to notice how this process reflects real life. Many projects, dreams, and relationships are fragile, vulnerable to mistakes and challenges. And yet, with care, patience, and creativity, they can grow and become meaningful. The cardboard towers and walls remind us that the value of something lies not only in its endurance but also in the dedication with which we sustain it, and in the beauty we discover in its imperfection. The building of the towers and walls also had its own rhythm. There was no hurry, no strict schedule. Each box was placed according to the inspiration of the moment. A strip of tape here, a cut there, and the castle slowly took shape, growing in harmony with imagination. This calm pace allowed each gesture to be felt, as if every fold, every stacking of boxes was part of a silent dance between hands and cardboard. And there was something deeply poetic in that scene, watching a tower tremble in the wind and still remain standing. It did not need to be perfect to be admired. Fragility became a symbol of resistance, persistence, and simple beauty. The cardboard castle taught, silently, that greatness does not depend only on external solidity, but on the life breathed into every detail, no matter how small. If you have ever built something fragile that nonetheless brought joy or meaning, share it in the comments. Each experience strengthens the understanding that value and durability are not synonyms. And if you feel drawn to these calm, gentle, imaginative stories, consider subscribing to the channel. In doing so, you help keep alive a space where imagination and delicacy are free to grow. In the end, the fragile towers and walls were more than stacked boxes. They were symbols of courage and imagination. They supported not only the castle but the entire kingdom of invisible stories, memories, and dreams. And even if one day they were to crumble, they would remain forever in the thoughts and memory of those who dared to build and to believe. Every proper castle needs a library, a place where past, present, and future can coexist in silence, and where each book, even if invisible, tells stories that feed the imagination. In the cardboard castle, the library was not made of sturdy shelves or hardcover books. It was an improvised space, made of stacked boxes and crumpled papers, but within the mind of the one playing, it contained infinite volumes of stories. Each imaginary book had its own essence. Some recounted adventures of brave knights who defended the kingdom against invisible dragons. Others narrated festivals held in the cardboard halls, describing celebrations so elaborate that only the imagination could reproduce them. There were also accounts of invisible subjects, court intrigues, secret maps, and distant lands that could never be reached physically. The most fascinating thing about the library of imaginary stories was that it was infinite. No shelf ever ended, no corner was too small. Every time one entered the improvised space, new books appeared. Some were written in that very moment, as imagination unfolded. Others emerged as memories of past play, preserved in the mind as if they were precious manuscripts. And there was an order of its own, though invisible. Each book occupied its place according to its relevance at the moment. Perhaps in one afternoon it was interesting to read about epic battles, and on another, about poems and songs of the kingdom. The library thus adapted to the time and the mood of its explorer, always offering the right story at the right moment. A charming detail was that all visitors of the castle, even the invisible ones, could contribute to the library. Each invented subject could write their memories, record adventures, or recount the day's events. Every narrative merged with the others, forming a collective archive where all voices had space and importance. It is curious how the library, even without real books, wielded immense power. Entering it was an invitation to silence, reflection, and imagination. One only needed to close their eyes to visualize colorful covers, hear pages being turned, and feel the scent of freshly created stories. The space, fragile like the rest of the castle, transformed into a temple of memories and possibilities. Creating this library also taught patience and attentiveness. Every imaginary book needed to be read carefully, absorbing details, understanding nuances, and respecting the stories of others. It was an exercise in empathy and listening, even if everything took place in the invisible cardboard and tape kingdom. This practice reflects something profound. Often in life, we need to create spaces for our own stories. Places where we can store memories, record learnings, and imagine possibilities. The cardboard library reminds us that not everything needs to be tangible to be real. Reality can also exist in imagination, in memories, and in the narratives we carry. If you have ever invented stories, memories, or books in your mind, share them in the comments. Each account strengthens the collective kingdom we build together, made of boxes, paper, and imagination. And if these stories bring calm or inspiration, subscribe to the channel. It is a way to participate in this space where the imagination has voice, time, and room to grow. In the end, the library of imaginary stories did not exist in wood or ink, but in something more enduring, in memory, in imagination, and in the heart of those who believed in every word, every adventure, and every invisible subject. For in the cardboard castle, the most important books were never touched, but always read, in the minds and memories of those who dreamed. Every castle, no matter how improbable, needs a place for rest, contemplation, and small enchantments. In the cardboard castle, this space was born as the secret garden. It was not made of fertile soil, real flowers, or trees that grew over time. It was a space created from paper, colors, small dried leaves, and, above all, the imagination that filled it with life of its own. The secret garden was hidden, like any place meant for introspection. Between crooked towers and cardboard corridors, there was a discreet opening, perhaps a folded piece of paper serving as a gate. Entering it was an act of discovery, the realization that even in the most improvised kingdom, there was a corner reserved for calm, contemplation, and silence. Inside the garden, everything was symbolic. Stones were represented by bottle caps, paths were drawn on the ground, and flowers appeared from nowhere, imagined in colors that existed only in the mind. Each detail had its own story. A flower could bloom from a happy thought. A tree could be planted with an old memory. A shady corner could serve as a safe refuge for invisible subjects. The garden also functioned as a laboratory of emotions. It was the space where fears and joys met, where one could observe the passage of time slowly and almost magically. There, in silence, the cardboard kingdom became less about walls and towers and more about care, respect, and attention to details that often go unnoticed in real life. It was curious to notice how the presence or absence of visitors changed the perception of the place. Alone, the garden was a space for intimate reflection, full of imaginary colors, sounds, and scents. With friends or invisible subjects, it transformed into the setting for stories, silent adventures, or invented conversations. Each visit left an echo, as if every step registered in thought enriched the space. The secret garden was also the stage for small rituals. A paper bud could be collected and placed in a wishing box. An imaginary flower could be offered to an invisible subject, or simply sitting in silence, observing a small pond drawn with pencil and paper, was enough to feel the calming effect of the place. Every gesture carried meaning, and every gesture contributed to the magic of that corner. And there was a delicate, fragile beauty in this space. Like the towers and walls, the garden could be altered or dismantled at any moment. An imaginary wind could knock down flowers or shift stones. Yet precisely because it was fragile, it was also precious. Every care, every attentive glance, reinforced the feeling of belonging, showing that even in improvisation, it is possible to create beauty, peace, and order. It is impossible not to notice the parallel with real life. We all need secret gardens, physical or mental spaces where we can reconnect, reflect, and breathe. The cardboard castle merely makes visible, in a playful and poetic way, something already inside each of us. The ability to create safe havens, even amid the fragility and transience of the world. If you have a secret garden, real or imaginary, share it in the comments. Sharing these spaces is like planting invisible seeds that bloom in the imagination of others. And if this idea brings peace or inspiration, consider subscribing to the channel. It is a way to keep this kingdom of tranquility, creativity, and gentle stories alive. In the end, the secret garden needed neither soil nor water. The imagination of its inhabitant was enough. And so, among boxes, towers, and invisible books, a space flourished dedicated to introspection, contemplation, and silent beauty. For sometimes, the true greatness of a castle does not lie in its walls or throne, but in the small corners we keep for ourselves. The cardboard castle gained a special dimension when night fell. The adventures that seemed like simple play during the day transformed into small epics, wrapped in shadows, silence, and mystery. Even if the castle was inside a room or backyard, the imaginary darkness created a unique atmosphere that stimulated the imagination and expanded the boundaries of the kingdom. The night was not real, but it was felt. Turned-off lamps, closed curtains, and deep silence created an environment where each tower, corridor, and wall became the setting for entirely new stories. A simple gust of imaginary wind could become a stormy breeze, a distant sound, the omen of intrigue or invasion. Darkness gave life to every shadow, and each shadow, in turn, became a character in the adventures. In these nighttime adventures, the invisible subjects took on more intense roles. Vigilant guards patrolled corridors with silent steps, imaginary spies watched secret entrances, and invisible knights prepared for missions never seen by real eyes. The cardboard throne remained the center, but now it was also the command post for imaginary operations, where strategies and plans were quietly devised. The map of the imaginary territory, previously just a reference, came alive at night. Every tower and wall was carefully explored, and each step was a small adventure. It could mean crossing an imaginary bridge over a non-existent river, exploring a paper forest, or discovering a secret clearing that only revealed itself when the real light went out. Everything was a dance between reality and fantasy, between the visible and the imagined. Nighttime adventures were also marked by small challenges. A narrow corridor could be considered a risky passage, a crooked tower, an obstacle to climb, an unstable wall, a test of courage. Every difficulty faced, though invented, brought a sense of accomplishment. And even if everything existed only in the mind, the intensity of the experience was real, touching feelings of bravery, curiosity, and excitement. Moreover, The night encouraged creativity. Without the clear light of day, every element of the castle could be reinvented. A box that had served as a wall could become a secret hideout. A folded piece of paper, a magical door to another kingdom. The silence of the night amplified the perception of each detail, and the imagination filled in gaps that were unnoticed during the day. This practice also reveals something profound about play and imagination. It is in the absence of light or certainty that creativity flourishes most. Nighttime adventures remind us that spaces, even the simplest or most fragile, can transform when seen from a different perspective. Perception changes, the world reorganizes, and suddenly the ordinary becomes extraordinary. If you have ever allowed yourself nighttime adventures, even indoors or in the backyard, share them in the comments. These experiences, however silent they may seem, are part of a collective memory of imagination and courage. And if these stories awaken a sense of calm or curiosity, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription strengthens this space where delicate, imaginary worlds can flourish, slowly, quietly, yet intensely. In the end, nighttime adventures transformed the cardboard castle. It ceased to be just a fragile construction and became a stage for stories, tests of courage, and silent discoveries. In the kingdom of imagination, darkness does not frighten. It reveals hidden worlds, strengthens creativity, and allows every subject, visible or invisible, to live adventures they will never forget. At the heart of every kingdom, there are moments of celebration that stand out from the rest. In the cardboard castle, this moment took shape as the grand ball of the castle. There were no sparkling chandeliers or velvet curtains. There were no real guests. But the imagination had infinite resources to transform fragile walls and improvised corridors into a majestic hall, where every detail seemed to pulse with silent joy. The ball was announced solemnly. Invisible trumpets echoed through the corridors, and invitations were delivered to invisible subjects, imaginary friends, and even characters from invented stories. The cardboard throne, which had previously been a center of command and reflection, now served as a stage for performances and welcome speeches, elevating the event to something almost ceremonial. Upon entering the hall, each imaginary visitor found a special place. The floor, marked with lines of tape or projected shadows, indicated where to dance. The cardboard walls, although simple, were perceived as decorations, as if reflecting colorful lights that only existed in the mind of the observer. And each piece of music played was a symphony of imagined sounds, creating rhythms and melodies that filled the space with emotion and movement. The ball was more than a simple gathering. It was a stage for stories and unexpected encounters. Invisible knights danced alongside imaginary queens. Advisors joined in improvised choreographies. Even the invisible subjects found room to express themselves, creating steps and gestures that, although imperceptible to real eyes, were meaningful within the kingdom. Each dance was a narrative, each gesture carried intention and beauty. And, as in every memorable ball, special costumes appeared. Though invisible, they were detailed. Imaginary crowns, dresses made of colors that existed only in the mind, shimmering capes, and shoes that marked steps in an adventurous rhythm. Each participant transformed, temporarily assuming roles of royalty or story characters, contributing to the magical atmosphere of the event. The Grand Ball was also a moment of discovery and learning. Improvised movements taught coordination and attention. Sharing space with invisible subjects cultivated empathy. And each improvisation, each invented gesture, reinforced creativity and freedom of expression. The event showed that, even without real structures, imagination could create rich and meaningful experiences. Moreover, the ball reinforced the cohesion of the kingdom. With every dance, every movement, visible and invisible participants shared moments of connection. Silent laughter, invented gestures, and stories told during breaks created invisible but profound bonds. It was proof that the unity of the kingdom did not depend on materials, but on attention, care, and shared imagination. If you have ever participated in an improvised ball, even in thought or play, share it in the comments. These memories help build a collective castle of recollections and stories. And if the theme of the ball evokes a sense of serene joy, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription keeps alive this space where fragile kingdoms, imaginary celebrations, and quiet adventures can flourish slowly and quietly. In the end, the Grand Ball of the Cardboard Castle did not need real luxuries. Its richness lay in the imagination of the participants, in the movements created, the stories shared, and the feeling of belonging. Because, in the kingdom of fantasy, the festivity is not measured by the sparkle of material, but by the intensity of the moments lived and the memories that remain, even when the boxes and papers no longer exist. In the Cardboard Castle, as in every kingdom, there are places that awaken curiosity, mystery, and an almost magical feeling. One of these places was the attic, hidden above the improvised towers and accessible only by an imaginary staircase or a narrow little corridor. It was a reserved space, silent and wrapped in shadows, where secrets accumulated and old stories seemed to whisper to anyone daring enough to climb. The attic was not large. Made of stacked boxes and poorly fitted pieces of cardboard, it seemed smaller than it really was. But within it, perception expanded. Everything gained depth and meaning. A corner could house imaginary chests, filled with treasures and memories. A non-existent window could reveal distant landscapes created solely by the mind. Every detail, no matter how simple, contributed to the charm of the space. The secret of the attic was not only physical but symbolic. It was the place where imaginary objects of priceless value were kept. Books of invented stories, secret maps, delicate crowns, mementos of past adventures, and letters addressed to invisible subjects. Everything was there, organized or scattered in an apparently random way, yet meaningful to those who knew the castle. Climbing to the attic was an act of exploration and introspection. Every step on boxes and cardboard required care, attention, and silence. The imaginary staircase creaked under the weight of imagination, as if to warn that this space was special, different from the rest of the castle. Entering it meant allowing oneself to discover forgotten stories, recall old adventures, or invent new secrets to keep. Naturally, the attic was also a stage for revelations. A stored object could awaken memories of a party, an invented map, or a nighttime dance. Every detail had the power to bring forth memories and sensations that seemed asleep. It was as if the attic were a time chest, a space where past and present met, silent and profound. The mystery of the attic also stimulated creativity. Sometimes, an apparently empty box transformed into a doorway to another kingdom. An old piece of paper became the diary of an invisible subject. Imagination filled every corner, shadow, and surface, creating a space that constantly reinvented itself. Nothing was fixed. Everything could transform according to the wishes of the one playing or exploring. It is interesting to note how the attic reflects something about real life. We all carry secrets, memories, and recollections that we keep in inner corners. The attic of the cardboard castle is simply a playful representation of these spaces, reminding us that there is beauty and meaning in places that seem hidden, silent, or forgotten. By accessing them, we discover stories, lessons, and parts of ourselves that might otherwise go unnoticed. If you have ever had an attic, imaginary, real, or metaphorical, share it in the comments. These spaces, even if invisible, strengthen our understanding of who we are and the stories that accompany us. And if the mystery of the attic awakens curiosity or a sense of calm, subscribe to the channel. It is a way to keep alive a space where secrets, memories, and imagination coexist, slowly and quietly. In the end, the secret of the cardboard castle's attic was not just in the objects or stacked boxes, but in the experience of exploring it. Every visit was an invitation to introspection, discovery, and creation. For sometimes, the most fragile and improvised places hold the greatest treasures, not of gold or silver, but of memories, stories, and dreams that remain alive in the hearts of those who believe. In the cardboard castle, there was something that transcended the fragile walls, the improvised throne, and even the crooked corridors. There was the wind, invisible, yet present, which seemed to carry messages, stories, and signs from other places. And in the imaginary kingdom, the wind had messengers. They were not real birds nor letters sent by mail. They were whispers, drifting leaves, loose papers, and gentle breezes that signaled events, adventures, or important news for the invisible subjects. These messengers were subtle. One only needed to close their eyes and feel movement in the hair, hear the delicate sound of a swaying paper, or notice a stacked box tilting slightly. Everything indicated that something was arriving, that news had come, or that the kingdom required attention. The wind, as a carrier of messages, connected different parts of the castle and, in a way, all corners of the imaginary territory. Each message carried by the wind could be a new adventure. Perhaps an invisible subject asked for help to cross an unstable bridge, or a secret map revealed a clearing never explored. Sometimes, the wind carried only memories, sounds of past celebrations, echoes of nighttime dances, or recollections stored in the secret attic. And even invisible, these messages created action and movement within the kingdom. What is fascinating is that these messengers were unpredictable. There was no set routine. One breeze could arrive softly and linger. Another could blow strongly, shifting small cardboard constructions. Yet it was precisely in this unpredictability that beauty lay. It taught that not everything can be controlled, and that sometimes one must observe, listen, and respond calmly, allowing the unexpected to become a meaningful experience. The wind also had a poetic role. It carried fragments of stories, spreading magic and inspiration throughout the castle. A leaf dancing in the air could mark the beginning of a new narrative. A paper moving gently could signal a meeting of invisible subjects. Even a light sigh could be interpreted as advice from the kingdom itself, delivered without words, only felt. And there was special care for these messengers. Every subject, even invisible, learned to recognize them, interpret their signs, and respond appropriately. It was a way to practice perception, attention, and patience. More than that, it was a reminder that communication, even subtle, has power. It connects, guides, and strengthens bonds. The wind and its messengers also reminded that the castle, though made of cardboard, was alive. It breathed, changed, and adapted. It was not merely a static backdrop for adventures. It was a sensitive organism, responding to stimuli and encouraging attention to its environment. Every touch of wind or movement of paper made the kingdom more real, more tangible within the imagination. If you have ever felt the presence of messengers in your imagination or play, share your experiences in the comments. These moments show that even invisible signs and memories can guide our actions and enrich our stories. And if you feel that these tales bring calm or curiosity, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription helps maintain a space where delicate and sensitive worlds can exist in harmony. In the end, the wind's messengers were more than breezes or drifting leaves. They were bearers of stories, adventures, memories, and magic. They carried the essence of the cardboard kingdom, reminding us that even the invisible can have presence, the intangible can touch, and that every detail, no matter how small, contributes to the silent grandeur of an invented world. In the cardboard castle, there were moments when decisions needed to be made. Although there were no real subjects or flesh and blood advisors, there existed the Invisible Council. It was an assembly formed by invented characters, memories of past stories, and ideas that materialized only in the imagination of the one occupying the improvised throne. And yet, its meetings carried weight, guidance, and meaning. The Invisible Council gathered in silence. Each member occupied a space in the cardboard hall, sometimes seated on boxes, other times in imagined positions that existed only in the mind of the king or queen. There was no audible voice, yet opinions were heard. A gesture, a thought, or even a feeling was interpreted as words, forming subtle and profound dialogues. These councils were moments of reflection. Problems of the imaginary kingdom, such as the arrangement of towers, the organization of festivities, or the course of nocturnal adventures, were discussed with care. Each decision, even if symbolic, required attention, patience, and respect for the internal logic of the kingdom. There was no rush, and serenity dominated the room, allowing imagination to flourish with clarity. The beauty of the Invisible Council lay in collaboration. Each character, though physically non-existent, contributed unique perspectives. A knight might suggest protection for a fragile tower. An imaginary subject could indicate the best way to organize the banquet hall. Even inanimate objects, like maps or library books, were consulted as if they had a voice of their own. This collaboration, though entirely mental, reinforced the importance of listening, reflecting, and valuing different points of view. There were also implicit lessons. The council taught that not all decisions need to be obvious or immediate. Sometimes, the best solution emerges from observing, waiting, or noticing details that go unnoticed. Silence in this context was as valuable as any argument because it allowed intuition and imagination to guide the kingdom's choices. The pace of the council meetings was slow, almost meditative. Discussions unfolded gradually, each thought explored, and every suggestion considered. There were no deadlines, only the need for balance and harmony. This calmness directly influenced the rest of the castle, for each decision affected how the kingdom developed, from the placement of boxes to the organization of nocturnal adventures. And although invisible, the council left tangible marks. Decisions regarding the library, the secret garden, the festivities, and even the attic resulted in visible changes within the cardboard castle. Each alteration reinforced the sense that, even in the imaginary world, thought and action are connected, and that our choices, even if symbolic, carry significant consequences. If you have ever created imaginary councils or participated in silent decision-making with invented characters, share your experiences in the comments. These moments reveal how imagination can be structured, collaborative, and meaningful. And if you feel that these reflections bring calm or curiosity, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription helps maintain a space where fragile worlds, subtle thoughts, and silent decisions can exist in harmony. In the end, the deliberations of the Invisible Council showed that true leadership, even in a cardboard castle, requires listening, patience, and consideration. For in the imaginary kingdom, the most important decisions do not depend on physical presence, but on the attention, care, and imagination of those who believe in every gesture, every thought, and every silent counsel. In the realm of the cardboard castle, there was a river. It was not made of real water, nor did it have a true current. It was an imaginary river, drawn on maps, suggested by wavy pencil lines, and by the wind passing through the boxes. Yet, crossing it represented an adventure that demanded care, courage, and creativity, as if each step could turn into a story. The river appeared both as a challenge and an invitation. Its banks were drawn with irregular lines, imaginary stones marked pathways, and small improvised bridges, made of pencils, tape, or pieces of cardboard, served as access for anyone daring enough to cross. Each crossing was unique, depending on the courage and imagination of those undertaking the journey. The crossing could be solitary or shared. An invisible subject might accompany, offering guidance and silent words of encouragement. Sometimes, a real friend present in the environment joined the adventure, coordinating steps and adjusting boxes to make the experience more tangible. The river, though physically non-existent, created an intense and memorable experience, requiring attention and trust. The movement of the imaginary river also stimulated creativity. Gentle currents, invisible whirlpools, or improvised obstacles challenged those crossing. A paper log could become a floating bridge, a forgotten shoe, an improvised boat. Each adaptation, each invented solution, transformed the crossing into a silent lesson, reinforcing the idea that challenges are opportunities for imagination to flourish. There was also poetic beauty in this journey. Looking at the river, even without real water, one could sense the passage of time, hear the sound of invisible waves, and watch the dance of drifting imaginary leaves. The river represented movement, change, and the possibility of discovery. Each successful crossing brought a sense of achievement and empowerment, as if the entire kingdom breathed in harmony with the traveler. The imaginary river also served as a metaphor. Crossing it meant facing uncertainties, dealing with the fragility of the moment, and relying on limited resources, whether one's own imagination or the small physical tools available. Each crossing reminded that courage and patience go hand in hand, and that value lies not only in the destination but in the experience of moving, step by step, through the unknown. Furthermore, the river fostered connections. An invisible subject might need help crossing, an improvised bridge could be shared, or a story could emerge from the journey. In this way, the river was not merely an obstacle but a space for collaboration, learning, and collective storytelling. Each crossing added a chapter to the history of the castle and its invisible inhabitants. If you have ever imagined rivers or obstacles you needed to cross, even within your mind, share your experiences in the comments. These moments reveal courage, creativity, and attention to detail that make imagination come alive. And if these stories bring a sense of calm or curiosity, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription helps maintain a space where delicate worlds, silent adventures, and imaginary experiences can flourish. In the end, crossing the imaginary river showed that even non-existent barriers can be meaningful. That every step, every careful choice, and every decision carries weight, even in the most ephemeral of realms. And that, by crossing with attention and imagination, any obstacle can become an opportunity for discovery, learning, and, above all, quiet and profound joy. In the cardboard castle, there were moments when the kingdom needed to shine, not with real lamps or torches, but with the magic of imagination. And so was born the Festival of Imaginary Lights, a silent and delicate event where every corner, tower, and corridor became a stage for glow, color, and poetry, without a single real flame being necessary. The festival was planned with care. Even if invisible to outside eyes, every detail mattered. Strategic points were chosen so that the imaginary light could dance over the cardboard, reflect in improvised corners, and create effects of shadow and shimmer. Fragile towers became giant lanterns, corridors, sparkling passageways, and small clearings, places of enchantment and wonder. Each invisible subject participated in the festival in their own way. Some carried imaginary lanterns, others released invisible fireworks, while some merely observed, absorbing the silent glow that illuminated the kingdom. There were subtle movements, choreographed gestures, and interactions that, although imperceptible outside the castle, had a profound effect within the imaginary realm. The Festival of Lights was also a time for silent stories. Each light could represent a wish, a memory, or an adventure. A sudden sparkle could announce the start of a nighttime dance. A sequence of twinkling points could indicate messages carried by the wind's messengers. Everything was symbolic, but held real meaning for those participating. There was beauty in the fragility of the lights. They didn't need to be intense or constant. Perception, attention, and imagination were enough to make them shine. A wave of the hand, a delicate gesture, could turn a shadow into a star and an ordinary space into a stage of magic. The impermanence of the glow was part of the charm, reminding us that beauty often lies in ephemerality and subtlety. The festival also encouraged contemplation. Those who allowed themselves to observe the imaginary lights were invited to slow down, breathe, and connect with the moment. Each blink, each reflection, each shadow projected on the cardboard stimulated attention and presence. Imagination became a lens of perception, allowing simple details to transform into a silent and profound spectacle. Moreover, the festival fostered unity. Even without physical existence, invisible subjects shared the experience, created patterns of movement, and participated in improvised choreography. There was an exchange of energy, collaboration, and collective enchantment, showing that light, even imagined, had the power to unite, delight, and inspire. If you have ever imagined lights, colors, or festivals in your mind, share your experiences in the comments. These moments, however silent they may seem, strengthen our ability to create beauty, celebrate, and notice invisible details. And if the festival brings you calm or inspiration, subscribe to the channel. Each subscription helps maintain this space where delicate worlds, ephemeral lights, and silent stories can flourish in harmony. In the end, the Festival of Imaginary Lights showed that true illumination does not depend on lamps, torches, or electricity. It depends on attention, imagination, and the heart of the observer. For even in a cardboard castle, each invented light has the power to enchant, transform, and make the silent essence of a kingdom shine. For those who believe. There comes a moment in every story, even the most delicate and silent ones, when it is time to say goodbye. In the cardboard castle, the farewell was neither abrupt nor sad. It was calm, almost poetic, like the end of a dream that slowly dissolves at dawn. Each tower, each wall, each corner of the kingdom seemed to lean gently, preparing to rest, while the memory of the realm remained alive, carefully preserved in the imagination of those who created and inhabited it. The secret attic, the imaginary garden, the silent library, the corridors, and the halls of the grand ball, all seemed to take a deep breath, as if aware of the importance of each moment lived. Each stacked box, each fold of paper, each tiny imperfection carried memories of adventures, discoveries, and moments of pure imagination. The kingdom did not truly disappear. It merely withdrew, existing more quietly in the memories and thoughts of those who believed in it. The farewell process was ritualized and serene. One by one, the invisible imaginary subjects left the castle. Some walked across the improvised bridges of the imaginary river, others settled in the fragile towers to gaze at the last lights of the festival still twinkling in the corners of the hall. Each gesture was delicate, each movement seemed to echo as a silent note of respectful goodbye, which did not erase memories but transformed them into serene recollection. The nighttime adventures, the council of the invisible council, and the messengers of the wind seemed to quiet down. The imaginary river slowed its flow, the bridges were gently placed back in their resting spots, and the secret garden folded in on itself, holding invisible flowers, imagined colors, and a sense of peace. Even the grand ball, which had recently been the scene of joy and dance, came to a close quietly, leaving the echo of silent laughter and invented steps as a gentle memory. At the moment of farewell, the castle seemed to speak for itself. Each leaning tower recalled the courage to build something fragile and beautiful. Each wall, the care and attention devoted to its creation. Each corner, the imagination that filled empty spaces and gave life to what was, in reality, only cardboard. It was proof that fragility does not diminish greatness, and that the ephemeral can be as meaningful as the permanent. And, as in every serene goodbye, there was room for gratitude. Gratitude for every invented story, every imaginary subject, every crossing of the river or the secret attic. Gratitude for silent laughter, the poetry of the grand ball, and the glow of the festival of imaginary lights. Gratitude for allowing the mind to expand, imagination to flourish, and the kingdom to exist so intensely and profoundly, even if invisibly. If you allowed yourself to explore this cardboard castle, share adventures, and create silent memories, leave a comment telling us your favorite part. Each comment strengthens the collective kingdom that exists in all of our imaginations. And if this story brought calm, inspiration, or a quiet smile, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. This helps keep alive a space where fragile, delicate, and imaginary worlds can continue to exist, without hurry, without noise, but with intensity and presence. Now, close your eyes. Feel the gentle touch of the paper, the sway of the towers, and the invisible breeze that moves through the castle. Let each adventure, each subject, and each memory dissolve slowly, becoming part of the serene mist of your dreams. Feel the imaginary river, the secret garden, and the silent library folding in calmly, and allow the full grandeur of the fragile kingdom to fade softly, without rush, into the haze of your thoughts. Allow yourself to feel that, although the cardboard castle is now silent, it remains alive within you, in your memories, your stories, and your imagination. For, at heart, entire kingdoms are not measured by the solidity of their walls but by the intensity with which they were lived and remembered. And now, with the same gentle touch with which it was born, the castle rests. Good night.